As you can see behind me, there are hundreds of people lined up to sign a petition. What's the question? Should Alberta separate from the rest of Canada?
You can see the line. Like, the lines are there everywhere. For every event, doesn't matter, small town, big city, medium city, the lines are there.
I think the people of Alberta would agree with that sentiment, that they would prefer not to be a part of Canada and be a part of the United States, because we are winning day in and day out.
It's been an abusive relationship for so long, really. I think most of us just want out.
Everybody's fed up. We're done with it. We got to do something.
Alberta just unleashed a 51st state shockwave across Canada, pushing the independence movement into its most serious phase ever. Massive petition lines and verified signatures have turned this surge into a force with real legal weight, and if Alberta steps out, it gains direct access to US power and economic scale, while Canada absorbs a hit that reshapes its entire national balance.
Supporters of the Stay Free Alberta petition to leave Canada and become an independent state say they are already well on their way to their goal. That's 177,000 signatures by May 2nd.
What you're watching is Alberta's independence movement crossing from opinion into procedure. And that shift changes everything. Once something stops being a debate and becomes paperwork, it stops being optional and starts being enforceable. Fall.
Group of Albertans wanting to separate from Canada is confident it will collect enough signatures for an official referendum question in the fall.
Lines stretched across Calgary, Red Deer, Millet, Edmonton. Not just the big cities, but small towns where people drove an hour to stand in the cold and add their name to a petition authorized under Elections Alberta. Authorized means legal. Legal means it has rules. Rules mean it has power. The petition requires 113,000 verified signatures to force a referendum, roughly 3% of Alberta's eligible voters. Within the first 2 weeks, organizers reported collecting over 40,000 signatures, putting them on track to hit the threshold months ahead of schedule.
The chill of a central Alberta night in January couldn't keep hundreds from lining up in Red Deer for a chance to support an independent Alberta.
It's been an abusive relationship for so long, really. I think most of us just want out.
Your industry is garbage, and if you try to complain, we're going to call you a bunch of hicks and rednecks. Would any Albertan seriously take that offer? And so, you know what? We got the chance for freedom, and I'm going to support freedom.
Feelings of frustration towards Ottawa, one of the reasons why people turning out to Wednesday's petition signing.
And here's why that number matters more than you think. Alberta's 2023 provincial election saw 1.8 million votes cast. Most petition drives struggle to reach 5% of that number. This effort is trending towards 6 to 7%, and it's doing it in winter. Temperatures drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius, sometimes colder. Waiting in line for hours under those conditions to sign a form isn't something you do casually. Cold filters out curiosity. What remains is commitment, and commitment is what referendum campaigns are built on.
For me, it's more to do with the immorality that we have in our country, and I just want to see us go to a place where we're, focused on our home, our family, our children, both in the womb and to old age, and protecting life and liberty. So yeah.
The people showing up span every demographic: families with kids, workers in trucks, seniors who've lived through decades of federal politics and decided they're done waiting for change. This isn't a regional pocket or a single angry city. It's distributed across urban centers and rural towns, which is how movements gain durability. Hype concentrates, real political gravity spreads.
The federal government doesn't seem to be interested in working with Alberta, and it's unfortunate, but you know what, we have a choice to make, whether we continue the status quo or we can make a change.
I think I want to see change for my kids. I don't want them to carry all the debt that's going to happen by keeping in what we have right now.
So why now? Why is this accelerating instead of fading? Because the core complaint is simple, measurable, and tied to daily life. Alberta's economic output funds services elsewhere, while local control over that output feels increasingly limited. Between 2007 and 2022, Alberta contributed $244 billion more in federal taxes than it received in federal spending. That's an average net outflow of $16 billion per year, or roughly $3,800 per Albertan annually. Equalization is the easiest villain in Canadian politics because it's a formula people can point to, a transfer they can calculate, and a system that visibly moves money out of their province with zero reciprocal influence over how federal decisions are made.
It has to do with the fact that Canada has basically become a communist country controlled by communist China.
But this political scientist believes the Trump administration does want to break Canada apart and gain control of Alberta's oil reserves.
If you believe RAP, and again, I have trouble believing RAP.
When housing gets more expensive and services feel stretched, that $3,800 stops being an abstract policy complaint and starts feeling personal. Independence stops sounding radical and starts sounding transactional. Keep more of what you produce. Decide locally how it's spent. Control the industries that define your economy without waiting for approval from people who don't live there.
This is a huge message of protest to the government of Alberta when literally tens of thousands of Albertans will line up into a dark January night and silently wait in line with their neighbors with a look of determination on their face because they want to sign what they're calling the Alberta Declaration of Independence petition.
But money alone doesn't build movements. The secondary layer is respect, or the perceived absence of it. Albertans describe feeling mocked, dismissed, told their industry is outdated. When a population feels economically exploited and culturally alienated at the same time, those two grievances reinforce each other. The movement frames itself as self-determination, not activism. Self-determination sounds like a right, not a request.
Since the petition was approved at the start of January, its provincial tour has drawn crowds, including these scenes in Red Deer, these in Millet, south of Edmonton, and in Calgary.
The pictures they're showing you, it's exactly like this. People lined up around the corner, down the road.
And here's where independence stops being about leaving Canada and starts being about leverage. Inside the current system, Alberta argues, requests, and absorbs decisions made elsewhere. Outside that structure, Alberta negotiates using assets that actually matter. Energy, geography, trade routes. Those don't disappear when independence happens, they become bargaining chips. And once you're holding chips, people stop lecturing you and start listening.
I just wanted to get this done, and I think more Albertans need to come and get signed up for this too.
We need our freedom. We need to be able to make our own decisions.
We're pretty excited about the fact that we're getting long lineups around the halls to sign. That's always wonderful. We're not having to chase people around. They're coming to us.
The energy connection to the United States already exists. Alberta produced 3.7 million barrels per day in 2023, and 97% of crude exports went south. The infrastructure, the contracts, the supply chains are already running. Independence doesn't invent a new relationship with the U.S. It removes the middle layer. It turns a provincial relationship into a direct one, cutting out federal approvals, reviews, and delays.
Stay Free Alberta's proposed question is, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada to become an independent state? The group's lawyer feels their efforts to collect the necessary 177,000 signatures will send a strong signal to Ottawa.
Which brings us to pipelines, because pipelines are where theory meets evidence. Alberta holds 170 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. The third largest in the world, yet major export infrastructure remains constrained after more than a decade of federal reviews, court challenges, and policy reversals. The Canadian government purchased the Trans Mountain Pipeline for $4.5 billion in 2018. Its total projected cost has since climbed past $30 billion. That's political interference inflating costs while delaying economic value. For many Albertans, this became the proof story. Ottawa manages Alberta's economy without bearing the consequences of delay or cost overruns.
So we can be in control of our own freedom, and not only the freedom, but to not be held down by the federal government that has done it to us for 50 years.
Delay accumulates, and when delay stretches across years, then decades, the conclusion people reach is structural. The system isn't slow, it's designed this way. Independence gains traction because it promises alignment between decision makers and the people who pay for those decisions. But a domestic referendum, even if it passes, is only the first step. The real question is recognition, and recognition is where this story escalates into foreign policy. A referendum creates a mandate. Recognition creates reality. Quebec held a referendum in 1995 and came within 1 percentage point of winning, but international recognition never materialized, so the legal and practical status remained unchanged. Independence movements succeed when external powers decide they're legitimate. That shifts the story from a Canadian internal debate to a geopolitical calculation.
There sure is. And it's probably something called equalization payments, which you don't have in the United States. But in Canada, equalization payments mean that the richer province essentially pay the bills for the so-called poorer provinces.
And this is why Ottawa would panic if the United States entered the conversation publicly. Because the US is the neighbor whose recognition changes everything. Canadian leverage over Alberta depends on Alberta having nowhere else to go. The moment Washington indicates interest, that leverage collapses.
With its natural resources, its oil industry. So Alberta is spending billions of dollars of its treasury to support people in Quebec, in Ontario.
Which is why what happened last week matters. A senior U.S. official speaking on record discussed Alberta in the context of resources, pipelines, and natural partnership. The official framed Canada as blocking energy exports that the U.S. could benefit from and referenced people talking about a referendum. This wasn't a fringe commentator or a think tank paper. This was cabinet-level visibility, and cabinet-level visibility is what turns a regional story into an international one.
Whose neighbor is the United States of America, the largest economy in the world with the most powerful military, who's culturally aligned to us. We speak the same language. We like sports. We largely follow the same religions. We have the same culture and other things that connect us.
The narrative package was clean. Alberta has resources. Canada blocks pipelines. The US is a natural partner. The word natural does a lot of work there. It makes alignment sound inevitable, not opportunistic. And when a US official talks about sovereignty protection across immigration, economic, and security domains, that's an umbrella pitch. It adds strategic justification beyond money and culture. The cultural argument gets specific too. Alberta is described as closer to Montana, Idaho, Texas, and Oklahoma than it is to central Canada. That framing maps Alberta onto states Americans already understand, making alignment feel familiar instead of foreign.
Alberta contributes roughly $4.2 billion annually to federal transfer payments while receiving literally $0 back. And as I understand it, Alberta hasn't received their own share of equalization payments since the 1960s. Meanwhile, Quebec receives literally billions despite having lower tax rates than Alberta.
Now let's talk about what happens if negotiations fail. After a referendum, Alberta and Ottawa would negotiate terms. If talks collapse, Alberta shifts into de facto independence. At that point, international recognition decides the outcome. If the US recognizes Alberta, Canada's legal objections lose force. Once Alberta declares independence, forms a government, and is acknowledged by major powers, practical reality overtakes legal debate.
Alberta contributes roughly $4.2 billion annually to federal transfer payments while receiving literally $0 back. And as I understand it, Alberta hasn't received their own share of equalization payments since the 1960s. Meanwhile, Quebec receives literally billions despite having lower tax rates than Alberta.
If Alberta were to join the United States, the mechanics matter. Based on population, Alberta would gain roughly 6 to 8 seats in Congress. That's committee assignments, budget votes, and legislative leverage. Alberta wouldn't be absorbed, it would be represented with the same tools every other state uses to protect its interests. Defense integration and capital stability matter to markets. The U.S. defense umbrella isn't just military protection, it's a stability signal that affects investment, insurance, supply chains, and long-term planning. Stability reduces risk premiums. Lower risk means cheaper capital. Cheaper capital accelerates development.
The province of Alberta in Canada is the most Republican province in all of Canada, and they want out. Because right now in Canada, you have the elites in Ottawa that have been taking advantage of Alberta, of Albertans, of the oil industry, and just making them absolutely unhappy.
On the Canada side, losing Alberta would hit the Federation structurally. Alberta represents 17% of Canada's GDP. Economic models suggest the Canadian dollar could drop 15 to 20% following Alberta's exit. Credit ratings would likely downgrade as debt to GDP ratios spike without Alberta's tax base. Eastern provinces would face equalization restructuring, forcing either sharp spending cuts or tax increases to fill the $16 billion annual gap Alberta currently provides. This isn't speculation, it's arithmetic.
They want to leave Canada entirely. This isn't boomers clinging to nostalgia. This is young people who've watched federal climate policies destroy energy jobs, equalization payments, those are basically subsidies to the other provinces.
And here's the quiet accelerator, youth support. Polling shows independent support strongest among Albertans aged 18 to 34, with some surveys placing it near 40% in that cohort. Younger populations carry positions forward. Demographic replacement becomes a silent engine. Even if support plateaus today, the baseline rises as older, federalist-leaning cohorts age out and younger, independence-curious cohorts replace them. Time favors the movement, not the status quo.
They won't give us our pipelines. They don't support oil. They've never been on our side since the beginning.
No representation. We have no representation in Western Canada.
The landlocked rebuttal gets raised constantly, so let's address it operationally. Landlocked doesn't mean economically trapped. Alberta already conducts the majority of its trade by value with the United States. Switzerland and Austria are landlocked. Both maintain high living standards through transit agreements, tariff structures, and market access frameworks. Geography creates constraints, but constraints are managed through contracts.
Meanwhile, the Canadian economy continues to fall apart with the highest food inflation in all of the G7. Housing is still unaffordable. Homelessness is exploding, and the Canadian dollar is still around 70 cents to the US dollar.
What makes this moment distinct is that participation breadth has replaced partisan edge. A 2023 Angus Reid survey found 33% of all Albertans would vote to leave Canada today, up from 25% in 2019. Among decided voters, that figure climbs to 38%. Support jumps to 52% when respondents are asked if they'd support independence if it meant keeping equalization payments within the province. That conditional support tells you the core driver isn't identity, it's economics reframed as fairness.
We're going to be able to save our funds from idiots that send it across the ocean to we don't even know the countries and what is being done with it, whereas we could do so much for our people. Our children need to go to university, but we can't afford it.
Independence referendums mobilize voters who typically sit out elections. Quebec 1995 saw 93.5% turnout. Scotland 2014 hit 84.6%. High turnout changes electoral math and reduces the reliability of traditional polling assumptions. Once a population commits at this scale, movements rarely revert to dormancy. Petition thresholds, signature counts, and fixed timelines convert sentiment into sequence.
This is what years and years of liberal failures, of manipulation of politicians who don't care about the everyday working people. This is the effects. This is what happens.
Alberta has moved past speculation and officially entered the independence phase, where this is no longer a debate but a structured political process backed by legal mechanisms, mass participation, and a clear path toward a referendum that Ottawa cannot ignore. And as that reality sets in, the conversation naturally widens, because once independence is on the table, Alberta's future relationship with the United States stops being theoretical and starts being strategic. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is far from over.